My name is Ryan Stice. I'm a senior level student earning my certification for early childhood through 6th grade, and as best as I can summarize, my experience with math was kind of like a weed growing in your yard. And I know probably not the way that you're imagining it. See, I've actually always had a pretty positive experience with math in my time in school. You know how even if you do nothing to support their growth, those weeds will just keep on keeping on until they take over your yard? Well, that's kind of how my time in math went. Despite some practices that likely weren't the best, I still succeeded in math. I suppose it's a good thing to know that poor teaching won't ruin a child who naturally picks up on it, though that's not to say it won't hurt the child who naturally struggles with it. The question I've always had, though, is as much as I succeeded in math, how much better could I be, and how much more would I actually like math if I'd been better nurtured? In other words, as much as those weeds have grown, what would have happened if you'd watered them? My memories of elementary school are honestly very fuzzy. I can only remember the face of 2 of my math teachers, but I couldn't tell you any of their names, much less anything that took place in the class. From what my mother's told me, though, it was pretty much all worksheet-based. We didn't use manipulatives or group work, there wasn't any effort placed into thinking about why math worked, we were just taught the rules and formulas and given lengthy pages of homework to take home. Fortunately, I took to math really well. My brain just worked in that way. When I was given these formulas or rules, I could either figure out why they worked on my own, or accept that they just worked and just memorize them. Homework, quizzes, and tests all went pretty easily. In fact, the only actual memory I have from elementary math was learning our times tables. We had a race to see who could learn them the fastest, and I was the first child in the regular class to learn them, with only 1 or 2 from the advanced class that were ahead of me. Even without great teaching, I was still doing very well. After all, you don't have to water weeds for them to spring up. In junior high, it was very much the same, at least as far as I'm aware it was. See, I can remember most every other subject from junior high, who my teachers were, what the classes were like, etc. Science with Mr. Witcher was my favorite, but I have no recollection of math in junior high. I do know that at one point I moved into the advanced classes, and apparently, though, these weren't taught any differently. We still didn't discuss why anything worked. We just had longer homework assignments and moved through the material faster. We also traded in worksheets for textbooks, but I was still successful and the weeds were still growing. Things finally got a little interesting in high school. No, not in the way things were taught, that was still painfully uninteresting. Freshman year, though, I went from apathetic and indifferent about math to pretty well disliking it thanks to one class, geometry. And it wasn't even geometry, really. I think that's a bit unfair to the subject. Just like the rest of it, I was good with geometry. I memorized the formulas I needed, figured out how and why things worked. My brain's just always been wired in a way that picks up math. The problem lied with the proofs and how we were graded. This was when there were a bunch of lines and shapes on the page and a few angles listed, and we had to figure out what was the angle of X. And I actually often enjoyed the puzzle aspect of it. The problem was we had to write down every rule in the order that we used them to explain how we got our answer. If we forgot even one rule, even the smallest of rules, we got the entire problem wrong. That meant you could get the right answer even using all the correct rules, but if you forgot to write it down, you got no credit for it. Sophomore year, we didn't have any proofs to do, but by this point, I was already mentally checked out of math. This was the year I stopped trying. I looked at our syllabus and realized that our homework was worth only 10% of our final grade. Quizzes, tests, classroom participation all made up the rest. I also knew that the teacher would go over the most difficult homework problems in class the next day. And by this point, homework took hours to do, so I decided I would just take the 10-point hit and stop doing my homework. I paid attention in class, aced the quizzes and tests, and pulled a B. But we still didn't take care of the weeds, and now they've stopped trying to grow, but they still do grow. Junior year was the last year that I actually had to take math, and I requested this year to be moved to the regular class because I didn't want to deal with the amount of homework and the quick pace anymore. Our teacher would do lessons and give us about 30 to 40 minutes to work on our homework. She was surprised when I actually turned mine in consistently with 20 minutes left in class, stating that nobody else ever turned them in before the next day. She told me I could sleep the rest of class if I wanted. Even with no effort putting in from either side, I was still doing well. Those weeds were still growing. I just can't help but wonder, though, what would happen if we had watered those weeds? What would happen if we'd actually nurtured them? Where would I be if some effort had been placed into my math instruction? Maybe I would have majored in the math field and actually graduated in 4 years instead of 7. Or maybe I would have gone secondary education route to teach mathematics. Or maybe I just have a better love and appreciation for math. Whether large or small, though, I think it's inevitable that better math instruction would have changed and possibly bettered my life, even if I did grow like a weed without it.